I opened my banking app after our family reunion, and my entire savings, $25,000, was gone. My dad looked me dead in the eye and shrugged. We needed it.
At that moment, something inside me snapped. And what came next?
Let's just say, my family never saw justice coming from their own daughter. If you've ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you, hit that like button, subscribe, and buckle up, because this is not just a story of stolen money. This is a story about exposing years of lies, standing up for yourself, and finally watching justice fall on the people who thought family loyalty meant silence. When I got the invitation to our family reunion, I hesitated.
It had been years since I'd really sat down with everyone.
Distance wasn't just miles, it was the kind of emotional gap that grows when you don't feel safe in your own family. But still, some part of me thought, maybe things could be different. Maybe we could start fresh. I showed up to my parents' house on a warm Saturday afternoon. The smell of barbecue filled the air, kids were running barefoot across the lawn, and the kind of laughter I hadn't heard in years spilled from the back porch. For a second, I let myself believe in that picture-perfect moment. My dad, Charles, was the first to greet me. He clapped me on the shoulder with a firm hand and said, "Look who decided to come home." His smile looked genuine, but something in his tone, that mix of pride and possession, made me uneasy.
Still, I pushed it aside.
Mom fluttered over with her usual nervous energy, fussing with my hair as though I was still 15. She said, "It's so good to see you, Katherine. You look so successful, must be all that hard work paying off." It sounded kind, but under her words was an edge. Almost like she was reminding me how far I'd come, and maybe how much they hadn't. Then there was my younger brother, Adam. He was the golden boy, the one everyone bragged about. Mom immediately pulled me over to hear how he was working so hard in college, how he was on the path to a bright future. Adam smirked, leaned against the deck railing, and gave me that lazy grin I'd seen 1,000 times growing up.
"Guess you're still the one with all the money, huh, sis?"
Everyone laughed lightly. I forced a smile. Inside, though, something stung. Why was it always about money with them? I'd built my life from the ground up, late nights, double shifts, scrimping and saving. Yet in their eyes, it wasn't accomplishment. It was a resource. The rest of the night went on in the typical reunion chaos, kids crying, uncles telling the same stories, cousins whispering gossip in the kitchen. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed, like my family wasn't just catching up with me. They were taking stock. At one point, while I helped clear plates, Dad leaned close and asked casually, "So, work's treating you well? You still doing those big projects?" "Yeah," I said cautiously, stacking dishes. "It's steady. I'm grateful." He chuckled. "Grateful? Come on, you've always had a knack for landing on your feet. Bet you've got a nice little cushion saved up by now." My hands tightened around the plates. There it was again, the probing, the casual slip into finances. I brushed it off with a vague smile, but my stomach knotted. Later that night, as the fire pit crackled and everyone shared stories, I remember feeling a strange distance. They laughed, they reminisced, they toasted to family. But behind their words, I felt something else brewing. A sense that to them, I wasn't just Katherine, their daughter and sister. I was Katherine, the bank. Still, I went home with a small spark of hope. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was just paranoid after so many years apart. After all, they were my family. Surely they wanted me there for me, not for what I had. I didn't know it then, but that night around the fire would be the last time I'd ever see them the same way again. The morning after the reunion, I woke up with that strange heaviness you get after being around family. You know the kind, part nostalgia, part exhaustion, part something you can't quite name. I decided to stop by a cafe before heading home. Nothing fancy, just a coffee and a croissant to ground myself after the whirlwind of yesterday. I slid my debit card across the counter like I always did, expecting the usual beep of approval. Instead, the cashier frowned. It says declined. Do you have another card?" My chest tightened. That had to be a mistake. I laughed it off, dug into my bag, and handed over my credit card. But my hands were shaking as I signed the receipt. Declined? I had money in there. More than enough. I sat down with my coffee, heart thudding, and pulled out my phone. My fingers felt numb as I opened my banking app. It spun for what felt like forever, and then the numbers hit me like a slap across the face. Balance, $16.72.
I blinked. That wasn't right. I refreshed the app. Still $16.72. My throat went dry.
My savings, $25,000 I'd built over years of scrimping and sacrifice, was gone.
Gone.
I scrolled through the transactions, my stomach twisting tighter with each line.
A massive withdrawal.
All at once.
My entire account wiped clean. I couldn't breathe. My first thought. Fraud. Identity theft. I needed to call the bank.
I needed to.
But then I saw it. The account number it had been transferred to. It wasn't random. It wasn't a stranger. It was my father's account. The room spun.
The coffee on the table blurred.
For a second, I thought I might pass out right there in the cafe.
I don't even remember driving back to my parents' house. The whole trip was a haze of pounding heartbeats and disbelief. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, tears of anger and confusion burning my eyes. When I walked through their front door, Dad was sitting in his recliner, newspaper spread out like it was any other Sunday. Mom was folding laundry, Adam tapping away on his phone. I held up my phone with the banking app still glowing on the screen. My voice cracked as I said, "Where is it?
My money.
All of it. Where the hell is my money?" Dad didn't even flinch. He lowered the paper slowly, like I'd just interrupted him for something trivial. He looked me straight in the eye and shrugged. "We needed it."
That's it. No apology.
No explanation. Just those 3 words, flat, casual, as though he'd borrowed my lawnmower, not my life savings. I stared at him, the silence roaring in my ears. You stole from me? You took everything." Mom avoided my eyes, her hands folding the same towel over and over like she could fold her way out of the moment. Adam smirked without looking up from his phone, as if my outrage was some kind of overreaction. Dad leaned back in his chair, voice calm, almost patronizing.
"Family shares, Katherine.
You've been blessed, you've done well. Your brother needed help, and we all pull together when family needs it. That's how it works."
I felt the blood drain from my face. Family shares. That's what he called it.
As if draining my account without a word was some kind of noble act of unity. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the collar and shake him until he understood what he'd done. But all I could do was stand there, frozen, my heart breaking in a way that had nothing to do with money.
It wasn't about the $25,000 anymore.
It was about the betrayal, the cold certainty that in their eyes, I wasn't a daughter. I was an ATM. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of something underneath the pain.
Not just shock. Not just despair. Resolve.
This wasn't going to end here. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the glow of my phone still on the nightstand with that sickening number glaring back at me, $16.72. My body felt heavy, but my mind was racing, running circles around the same questions. How could they do this? Why me? Am I overreacting? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's shrug. That dismissive, almost bored shrug. Like I was a child whining over something insignificant. My chest tightened until I thought it might cave in. I tried to breathe. Tried to tell myself it was just money.
Money could be earned back.
But my thoughts kept clawing at me. If it was just money, why did it feel like my entire childhood had been stolen along with it?
Because deep down, I knew this wasn't new.
I remembered being 10 years old, clutching a $5 bill I'd gotten for my birthday from a neighbor.
I wanted to spend it on a book at the school fair. Dad had seen it sticking out of my backpack and laughed. "You don't need that.
We'll hold it for you."
Of course, it disappeared.
When I asked about it weeks later, he waved me off. "Family needs come first, Katherine."
Family needs. That phrase echoed in my head like poison.
How many times had it been used to justify taking something from me? My time, my effort, my dignity? As the hours stretched on, I got up and paced my apartment. I looked around at the life I'd built, every stick of furniture, every framed photo, every little thing I had worked for on my own. And now, just like that, they had decided it wasn't mine anymore. Tears slipped down my face, hot and angry. I hated myself for crying. I hated that even after everything, a part of me still felt guilty for even thinking about fighting back.
Because wasn't that what they always drilled into me?
That real family sacrifices without question? But then another thought crept in, darker and sharper. If family means sacrifice, why is it always me who's doing the sacrificing? The more I turned it over, the more I saw the pattern. Adam needed help with homework. I gave up my weekends.
Mom needed someone to talk to about Dad's temper?
I became her therapist at 15.
Dad wanted someone to manage chores? I did them while Adam played video games.
And now, years later, after clawing my way into independence, after finally finding stability, they reached in and stripped it all away, without even the courtesy of asking.
By dawn, I was exhausted, hollowed out.
I sat at my kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee, feeling like the ground had been ripped from under me.
I wasn't just broke. I was broken.
But somewhere beneath the numbness, a seed of anger had taken root.
Small, quiet, but alive.
And I knew, sooner or later, it would grow.
4 days, I walked around in a fog.
Work piled up on my desk, unread emails stacked higher, and every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, half hoping, half dreading it was my father calling to apologize.
But of course, he didn't.
Instead, I got a text from my mom. "Sweetheart, I hope you understand. Adam really needed this.
He'll pay you back eventually.
Don't make this bigger than it is. We're family."
I stared at those words until the letters blurred.
My hands shook with fury. Don't make this bigger than it is? My life savings wasn't a little thing. It was years of saying no to dinners out, years of taking side jobs, years of anxiety every time my rent came due. And she wanted me to shrug it off? That night, I went to dinner with a friend from work, the kind of friend who can read you the second you sit down.
She listened quietly as I spilled everything.
My hands trembled as I told her about the shrug, the text, the way my family acted like my hard work was their safety net. When I finished, she leaned in, her voice steady but sharp. "Katherine, if anyone else did this to you, you'd call it theft. Why does it being your father suddenly make it okay?" Her words sank into me like a stone. Theft. The word I'd been avoiding. The word that made my chest tighten every time I thought it. I pushed my food around my plate, guilt rising like bile. But, taking legal action? Against my family? What kind of daughter does that make me? She didn't flinch. The kind who's tired of being used. You don't owe them your silence. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, toothbrush dangling in my hand, staring at my reflection. My face looked pale, drained, older than I remembered. I thought of my dad's words, family shares. I thought of my mom's text, don't make this bigger than it is. And then I thought of myself, 10 years old, clutching that $5 bill, watching it vanish into my father's pocket.
Something inside me cracked. Or maybe it clicked into place.
For years, I'd told myself keeping the peace was worth more than fighting.
That silence was the price of love.
That sacrificing myself was proof of loyalty. But standing there in my bathroom, I realized something chilling. They had already broken the family long before I even considered fighting back. They broke at the moment they decided my worth was measured by what I could give them. I set the toothbrush down, my hands no longer shaking. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt clarity instead of chaos. If I stayed quiet, they'd do it again. Maybe not money next time. Maybe something worse. I whispered to my reflection, the words tasting like fire.
No more. Not this time.
That was the moment the guilt began to die, and the resolve began to live. The morning after that mirror moment, I made a call I never thought I'd make. I contacted a lawyer. Her name was Michelle, sharp-eyed, calm, the kind of woman who made you feel steady just by being in the room. I sat in her office with my bank statements spread out on the polished wood table, my voice trembling as I explained.
It's my father. He emptied my account. 25,000.
Said it was for my brother's tuition. Michelle leaned back, her pen tapping lightly against her notebook. And did you authorize this transfer?
I swallowed hard. No.
I didn't even know until the next day.
Her eyes narrowed.
Then it's theft. Whether he's your father or not doesn't change the law. The word still stung, theft. But hearing it from her lips made it undeniable.
We began digging.
Michelle pulled my account history, traced the transfer, and confirmed it landed in my father's account before being funneled elsewhere. That's when things got interesting. You said this was for tuition, she asked, sliding me a document. Then why do these payments trace directly to a casino account?
My stomach dropped.
She turned a screen toward me, and there it was in black and white, thousands drained into Adam's gambling debts. Not tuition. Not books.
Not a future. Just bets.
For a moment, all I could do was sit there, the betrayal deepening like a knife twist. They hadn't just stolen from me, they'd lied, looked me in the eye, and cloaked it in noble words like family and education. I thought back to Adam's smirk at the reunion, the way he'd teased me about money.
My fists clenched under the table. Had he known then?
Was he laughing because he already knew what they planned?
Michelle's voice cut through my storm of thoughts.
This actually strengthens your case. It's not just theft, it's fraud. And once this goes public, the court won't look kindly on a father enabling his son's gambling addiction with someone else's money.
Public. Caught. Words that should have terrified me. And in a way, they did. But beneath the fear, something else pulsed. Power.
For the first time, I wasn't pacing my apartment at 3 a.m. wondering what to do. I had proof.
I had someone in my corner.
And I had leverage. The next step was gathering more. Old texts from Dad about helping Adam. Emails from my mother asking for temporary loans that had never been repaid. Bank statements from the past year that showed a pattern, small amounts siphoned without my consent. The $25,000 wasn't the first.
It was just the biggest.
Piece by piece, the picture formed. And it was uglier than I imagined. This wasn't a one-time desperate act. It was years of financial abuse dressed up as family loyalty. Late one night, I sat on my couch surrounded by papers, highlighting lines with a fury I didn't know I had. My eyes burned, my shoulders ached, but my pulse felt steady, focused. For the first time, I wasn't the daughter being drained dry. I was the woman preparing to fight. Still, a part of me wavered. A small, guilty voice whispered, "What if this destroys what's left of your family?" But another voice, stronger now, clearer, answered back, "What family? The one that steals, lies, leaves you empty?"
They destroyed it themselves.
By the time Michelle filed the paperwork, I no longer felt like a victim waiting for an apology that would never come.
I felt like someone who had finally drawn a line in the sand. And the line was about to be tested in court.
The courthouse smelled like paper, old wood, and nerves. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tightly in my lap, my stomach a mess of knots. Across the aisle, my father leaned back in his chair like he owned the place, arms crossed, jaw set in that same smug confidence he wore my whole life. Adam sat beside him, pale and restless, his knee bouncing like a metronome. My mother avoided my eyes completely, her gaze fixed on the floor as though she could disappear if she just wished hard enough. The judge entered, and we all rose. My pulse thundered in my ears. This was it. No more texts, no more arguments at the kitchen table. This was true thunder oath. My lawyer, Michelle, began by laying out the facts. The unauthorized transfer. The direct line from my account to my father's, then funneled into Adam's gambling debts. She presented the statements, the transfers, even casino records with Adam's name attached. Every document landed like a hammer. When it was my turn to testify, my legs trembled as I stood. But once I spoke, the fear shifted into something sharper. I told the court what happened in detail, how I discovered the drained account, how my father dismissed me with "we needed it," how I was left with nothing. I could feel the audience in the room reacting, small gasps, heads turning.
Not strangers anymore.
Witnesses. When Michelle asked how it affected me, my throat tightened. "It wasn't just money," I said, voice cracking. "It was trust.
It was years of my life. And they didn't ask.
They just took." I glanced at my father then, hoping for some flicker of remorse. But all I saw was annoyance, like I was inconveniencing him with my pain.
His turn came.
He straightened in his seat, voice dripping with self-righteousness. "Your Honor, this is family business.
My daughter has always had more than she needs.
We support each other, and she's making this a spectacle because she doesn't understand loyalty." Loyalty.
The word hit me like bile.
Then Michelle rose for cross-examination.
Calm. Precise.
She slid the casino records onto the table and said, "Mr. Walker, can you explain why your son's gambling debts were paid directly from your daughter's stolen savings? Was that her idea of family loyalty too?"
The room shifted. My father's jaw clenched.
Adam froze, his face draining of color.
Gasps rippled through the small crowd seated in the back.
My mother's hands covered her mouth, her eyes darting between us like she'd never seen us before. For the first time, my father's mask cracked. He stammered, he needed, but the confidence was gone. The judge leaned forward, eyes hard. "This is not family loyalty. This is theft.
And fraud." My heart pounded.
For years, I'd dreamed of someone, anyone, calling it what it was. And now, in a courtroom filled with strangers, it finally happened. I sat back down, hands trembling, tears burning my eyes.
The truth was out, and justice was within reach.
The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Papers rustled, chairs creaked, but no one dared to speak as the judge adjusted his glasses and looked over the evidence one last time. My father sat stiff, his jaw locked tight, the arrogance drained from his posture. Adam slumped forward, both hands gripping his knees, his face pale as chalk.
My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, whispering something I couldn't hear.
The judge's voice cut through the silence.
The facts are clear.
An unauthorized transfer of $25,000 was taken from the plaintiff's account and funneled directly into the defendant's possession, then used to satisfy gambling debts. This was not consent.
This was not family loyalty.
This was theft. The word echoed in the room like a gavel strike. I felt my chest tighten, not from fear, but from something I hadn't felt in weeks. Validation.
Someone finally named it out loud.
The judge continued, restitution in full will be paid to the plaintiff. Furthermore, given the fraudulent misrepresentation of the funds as tuition, this court will also be forwarding the matter for further investigation into potential criminal charges. I couldn't stop the tears. My hands flew to my mouth, a choked laugh slipping out between sobs. After everything, the nights awake, the guilt, the shame, justice wasn't just possible.
It was real. I glanced across the aisle.
Adam's face twisted in panic, whispering harshly at my father, who refused to look at him.
The golden boy's mask had cracked.
His bright future now tainted with the truth, gambling, lies, and theft exposed in front of strangers and stamped into court records. My father leaned forward, gripping the table so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked at me with eyes full of rage, not regret. His lips curled as if he wanted to spit venom, but the judge's gavel struck, silencing him.
That sound, sharp, final, felt like a weight lifting off my chest.
As we were dismissed, people in the gallery whispered, eyes darting between my father and me. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking under their gaze.
He was. I stood, legs shaky, but taller than I had in years.
Michelle touched my shoulder and whispered, "You did it." And in that moment, I realized she was right.
I didn't just win back $25,000.
I won back something my family had stolen long before the money, my voice, my boundaries, my worth. Walking out of that courtroom, sunlight spilling across the courthouse steps, I felt the tightness in my chest finally release.
They thought I'd stay silent.
They thought family loyalty meant my silence was guaranteed. But today proved the truth. Loyalty without respect is nothing. And for the first time in my life, I chose me. Walking down those courthouse steps, I didn't feel like the girl who had begged her family to see her, to respect her. I felt like a woman who had finally drawn the line, and held it. The money will be returned, yes. But the real victory wasn't in the numbers on a bank statement. It was in the way my father's voice cracked when the judge called it theft. It was in Adam's silence, his excuses finally dead in his throat. It was in the way strangers, not family, became witnesses to my truth and stood in quiet agreement that what was done to me was wrong. Justice didn't come from their apologies, because those never came.
Justice came from me refusing to stay silent.
And that's the part one wants you to remember. Sometimes revenge isn't about grand gestures or burning everything down. Sometimes it's standing your ground in the quiet, steady way that says, I matter, and I won't be erased. So, I walked away from that courthouse lighter, freer, and finally untangled from their grip. The girl they underestimated now owns her story, and her power.
And as for my family,
they'll live with the fact that their betrayal was not just a secret between us.
It's public record.
It's stamped into history, and every time they think about what they lost, they'll know I was strong enough to fight back. Because in the end, revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is rebuilding yourself, stronger than they ever imagined. Headphone, if this story hit you hard, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family loyalty?
I'd love to hear your story.